What's up, guys? Welcome to another episode of the Boxed Up Entrepreneur Podcast. In today's episode, I have YASMEEN, aka Latina Mess on TikTok. Now, this episode is going to be a little bit differently. Usually, I have business owners and entrepreneurs on this podcast, but today is going to be a little more geared towards a debate, so it should be a fun one. Now, a little backstory for today's episode. I started a series on TikTok that I called Rich People Are Evil, where I then continue to explain a different perspective on rich people. I believe in mainstream society, there's a big misconception for people towards the rich audience, the super rich audience. Now, when I talk about the super rich, I'm talking about multi-billionaires, like the elite of the elite. And so I started talking about these multi-billionaires in a positive way. And I had YASMEEN enter my comments, and we had a little back and forth about whether or not rich people are obligated to give back or whether they worked hard for their money. And so for today, we're going to talk about that topic specifically. So YASMEEN, thank you for coming on, and we're going to go right into it. And I'm just going to go ahead and ask you, should multi-billionaires, super rich people exist?
In my opinion, they shouldn't. Just because the way that these multi-billionaires accumulated their wealth is off the masses. Like, there has to be a major class divide in order for someone to have that much power and that much wealth and that much influence over our society.
Okay. And so you don't believe that the people that are in this position worked hard to get to that position?
No, that's not what I'm saying. They definitely worked hard, but so does every other American that's struggling to make ends meet. Like, they're working just as hard. That doesn't mean that they have the socioeconomic resources to get to the position that a lot of those billionaires did.
Okay. And so talking about resources, I don't know if you know this, but about 74% of all billionaires nowadays are self-made. So that means they didn't have any sort of funding. It's not a trust fund. There's no daddy's money backing them up. They literally started like Bill Gates started in a garage. He was a middle class family, no real advantage over any other human being ever. Just a very average person in life. And he started Microsoft in his garage. And he sacrificed, 10 years of his life where he dropped out of college and went all in on this company, took risks that most people wouldn't be willing to take to get to where he's at, right? And so that point of them having resources that others don't, I just don't agree with that.
Well, that's where I disagree, because he might not have had that economic kind of backing, but what he did have that served him very well was the kind of social status that a lot of intelligent Americans don't necessarily have. Like, he was a white male who was able to get proper education and the kind of support to develop his intellectual ability. So if you look at super underfunded areas in Baltimore, which is kind of really messed up. Like, I go there pretty frequently and I see a lot of kids who get involved in drugs, gangs, stuff like that. And a lot of these kids are actually really smart, but they're not necessarily given a choice because they need those funds for their family. Mm-hmm. So then they're either stuck with, okay, do I make minimum wage? Do I skip school and work 24/7? Or do I start pushing crack, weed, stuff like that? And then I could definitely compare that to my experience with entrepreneurs of color, just because being a PR manager, I worked with a few of them, and they never seem to have the same kind of social support that a lot of white male entrepreneurs have. Being an entrepreneur myself, I do see a big difference in the way that people who have that sort of class support improve on their ideas and get money and funding, because even if they don't have that, then they're a lot of the connotations that the position holds is what allows them to get that funding later on, mm-hmm. When they present their idea to investors, their investors are going to be a little bit less judgmental, and the way that they got there in the first place was because of that status. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes a little sense. Okay, and so regarding that, what would you say towards someone like Oprah Winfrey?
Oprah Winfrey, I'm pretty sure Oprah Winfrey had some economic backing from her family.
You think so?
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah, I mean, I personally don't know too much into Oprah, but obviously I know that she's not only a woman, which, you know, in today's society does slightly give you a disadvantage, but she's also colored. And so that's two things that are working against her, but yet she's in a position of where she's at now.
Oprah Winfrey, like I said, is one of like a billion. And the thing is, that's what matters here. Like, that one in a billion has what, like 75% of the wealth in America. Like, those elite people carry so much of the wealth that it's unjust in so many different ways. When you see there are people without healthcare, there are people without dinner every night, there are people who can't get like basic fundamental resources, and that's a problem. I just think that if billionaires are to get that kind of money and make it, because none of that money is like ethical. Like, a majority of that money comes from like, okay, they have to make profit, don't they?
Yes.
So they go to like these third world countries in Southeast Asia and like South America, and they get super cheap labor and resources, and they exploit these local communities that aren't as advanced as the United States. They make their money in unethical ways that they don't really give back. Like, you know how Bill Gates and a bunch of other billionaires signed like a billionaire's contract where they like, okay, like they're going to give back because they've made so much. What they gave back doesn't make up for what they've done. Like, Bill Gates, Apple, sorry. But they went into Africa and exploited lithium deposits there, which basically ruined the local economy of a lot of the communities there because like lithium is really valuable. And what he did in return was donate a bunch of mosquito nets like to these areas. Like, does that ruining the local economy versus donating mosquito nets? I just don't see how that makes up for it. And it's the same thing with like socioeconomic divide in America. It's ridiculous. Racism and sexism are continuously perpetuated in America because companies profit off of it. What I mean by that is that companies have the influence to like push certain laws because they pay off lawmakers. And these laws don't always benefit the American people. So they keep people in that position where they can't get out of it, which is why it's so difficult to become a billionaire in the first place. Okay, so you think the almost like the system is built against the common folk is what you're trying to get at. Yeah. Okay. And so to that regard, you think being broke and being in a position of disadvantage is not a choice, but it's kind of like a system that's against you? To a degree, yes. Okay. What do you think of people like self-made millionaires then that literally came from dirt? Let's talk like Elon Musk, right? Elon Musk came from nothing. He was a brilliant man, absolute genius of a person, but came from absolutely nothing. He got a scholarship to Harvard, dropped out of Harvard, and went on to build, you know, what we know, PayPal, Tesla, SpaceX. You know, what about individuals? Like, I'm a firm believer that if one person was able to do it, that means it's in the realm of possibility. Therefore, being in the realm of possibility means that anybody can do it. Well, that's the thing about being a billionaire. The point is you're able to get there because not everyone's able to do it. It's a system that keeps so many people down that when one person is able to rise to that amount of wealth, you're more likely to get struck by lightning than that happening, you know? Like, my whole thing with, okay, so he was incredibly intellectually capable. Fantastic. But does that mean that he should get that degree of wealth? is he ever going to use all that money? He might have come up with tons of innovative things, but that doesn't mean that other people should starve because of it.
But what does that have to do with him? How is it his responsibility what other people are doing? Right? Because I'm a believer that you're only responsible for yourself. You know, you can't be responsible for someone else's happiness, just like you can't be responsible for someone else's demise. The only thing you're responsible of is where you're at in that certain scenario and how you're going to get out of the scenario that you're in or stay in the scenario that you're in.
Well, the thing is, like, they are responsible for other people's demise. These corporations, the ones they get to this spot where they're like, okay, I've come up with this idea. It's getting backing. Now that I'm at this position, what do I do to keep myself here? Okay, well, let me pay off a congressman, a bunch of congressmen. Let me give them money. Let me join a super PAC. Let me give people money, and then they can push, making marijuana illegal. That was a thing. What was it, back in the 70s? Mm. There was nothing, like, there was literally no reason for them to do it. Like, there was no scientific research that said that marijuana, like, made you crazy, but they started putting out propaganda against it. You probably already know this, but they made it illegal because Black communities would smoke it a lot, and they knew it. So what they would do is they would jail a lot of Black people in those communities, and then the prison industry would make money off of it. Because the United States government gives money to the prison industry because it's private practice that they fund. Mm-hmm. So they have to like oppress the lower classes in order to get that amount of money. Like, that's just how it works. So I feel like they do have a responsibility to the people because they exploit the people to get there in the first place. You don't make your money, like, on the money doesn't make itself. Like, you have to have people below it that are making it.
Okay, so let's shift, because that's a good point, but let's shift the conversation from the billionaires, right? The people that are exploiting this class of people, that, like you say, and let's talk about the people that are in the lower social class, right? Let's talk about the bottom 1% of America. Now, do you believe that being in that position where you're that poor and you're in a situation where you're surrounded by negativity, right? Do you believe that's a choice, or are they stuck in there for life?
I think it's a combination of the two. The number one reason I feel like a lot of people are in that position is a lack of education, because they grow up in, like, these areas where there's not a whole lot of emphasis on learning about the government and, like, how policies are made and getting involved with that kind of stuff, and, like, really establishing good habits like work ethic and stuff like that. Because they aren't raised the same way a lot of, like, upper middle class people are, they are kind of stuck there, and the government doesn't put enough towards, like, funding that education, funding programs that will help these, like, kids grow up to be people that are, like, well established, even if they're not making a crap ton of money, you know, like, they don't have to be making millions, they just have to be making enough to live, and the system isn't helping that, you know, like, these people are raised a certain way, and then that's the way they're going to be for the rest of their life. And I don't think that the government's completely responsible for that, but I think to a degree, we owe our classes and, like, our people and our minorities, we owe them some kind of, like, help. We do, because that's what government is here to do. The government's meant to do. It's meant to, like, help the people and our culture, and I feel like capitalism has squashed out a lot of that culture.
Okay. But is it really an individual's responsibility? Like, government aside, right? Let's put government aside, because, you know, that's a whole different topic. That's a whole different debate. But just individual human beings, people like Bill Gates, people like Elon Musk, like those individuals, right? You say they have influence in the government, which you're right, they do. But why would they go out of their way to put themselves in a position where they themselves can't thrive when it comes at the expense of everybody else? You know what I mean? Like that, it comes down to, like, you're responsible for yourself. You're responsible for your own life. You're not responsible for anybody else's happiness. You're not responsible for anything else. You're responsible for your survival. You know, that's what humans are meant to do. We're supposed to make ourselves survive. And so these individuals are doing what it takes to make themselves survive. It takes to get them to the next level. Now, back to the other side. these low class individuals. Now, do you think it's possible? Has there ever been in history a scenario where someone from that super lower class has been able to crawl their way out of there into the middle class, into the upper middle class, and into the elite of the elite? Has that ever happened? Do you think that's ever happened?
Okay, so that's not necessarily what I'm trying to say. I'm not saying that rich people have to give all their money away and they have to, like, they're responsible for poor people. What I'm saying is that the system that allowed those rich people to get there in the first place and keeps them there, and they perpetuate that system. That is what I'm saying. Like, and because of that, those poor people that might have been able to get up there, it's incredibly hard for them to do that anymore. You know, like the middle class is growing because basically the bourgeoisie, the 1%, they stay there. They control our government, our economy, our culture, everything. And the thing is, like, that's a problem with the system that allowed them to be there in the first place. You can't say that they don't have a responsibility to the people, because even if they were to, like, put that kind of social donation into, like, helping, they would still have an inordinate amount of money. Like, they would have a ridiculous amount of wealth. Like, I'm talking, like, did you see that TikTok with, like, the grains of rice?
The rice, yeah.
He compared Jeff Bezos' wealth to, like, the average $100,000.
Mm-hmm.
$100,000 is, like, enough for a family of 5 to subsist off and be upper middle class. That's a lot of money. You can't even comprehend that amount of money.
Absolutely.
And he could end so many social issues by just putting money towards programs that already exist but are underfunded. But the thing is, he's not, because he keeps accumulating wealth. And, well, for what? Like, he's never going to spend that amount of money. Like, you say a lot of it is in his stocks of Amazon. Well, obviously, like, he owns Amazon. But, like, what is he going to do with those extra $1 billion he has in his bank account, in his back pocket? You know, like, what is he going to do with all that? You just can't spend it. Like, that stuff, it's not meant to be, like, conglomerated like that. It's meant to be, like, distributed just a bit more evenly. I'm not saying, like, everyone needs to make the same amount of money, like, cap stuff. I'm saying, like, don't allow it so that someone can be literally, like, just living ridiculously lavishly and have another kid, like, a couple blocks over, like, just dying because they don't have healthcare, you know?
Okay, so what would be your solution then?
Okay, so what I would say is definitely heavier taxes on the 1%. Stop taxing the middle class so much, like the people who are making, like, a decent amount of money, and start taxing the people who make ridiculous amounts of money. Because that doesn't cap it. That doesn't tell them, okay, you can't make a certain, like, you have to stop at this amount of money. Because they can keep making money. But, like, that money that's pulled from them will then be distributed. Okay, so this will go paying teachers better, improving education systems, paying politicians maybe a little bit more so that they stop accepting money from super PACs, you know? Putting money towards healthcare. You know, we actually would have saved a lot more money if we had switched from private to public insurance a long time ago in America. Putting that kind of money, because money is a concept at the end of the day. When you start valuing money over human life, there's an issue, because human life is real. We are all humans. We all have our own individual story. You know, so that's what I would do. I would start distributing it towards things that would, like, keep corruption down, keep class divide a little bit less divided, et cetera, et cetera. Okay,
so you want to make everyone a little more even, right? Now, that means that the super low end class, right, comes up a little bit. Now, all of a sudden, these people feel like they're, I don't want to say too good, but, you know, they don't want to work these bottom end jobs, right? So let's keep that line, because I mean, the people that are in the bottom position are working the daily jobs that make these giant corporations run. You agree with that, right? Okay, so now we're making everyone a little more even. Now these giant corporations don't have anybody to run those crappy bottom end jobs. Now all of a sudden these large corporations can't exist anymore. Now all of a sudden there's no more innovation. Now all of a sudden we stagnate as a human population because these individuals can't have the people to make their vision come to life.
So I feel like capitalism can work if you do make it a little bit more equal. I am very against big corporations. I'll get into that in a little second. But if you make it a little more even, that doesn't mean like they're gonna quit, because that's like they need jobs. It doesn't matter. But that means like maybe just paying them more so that they can have healthcare.
Okay, so if you're paying these people more, wouldn't these big corporations just decide to up their prices everywhere else? I mean, it's like the whole minimum wage thing.
Here's the thing. They dominate entire markets and get such a large amount of power and influence over our culture, economy, government, to the point where America is entering late stage capitalism, and you can see it everywhere you go. Like, for example, I went to Vermont last weekend, and they don't allow that kind of bullshit there. Excuse me.
You're okay.
They don't allow that kind of stuff there. No big signs, no ads. They like local businesses, so they promote those. They don't let like Dunkin's build everywhere. And I went to these local businesses, and let me tell you, the kind of quality was of like the food and the people and like the service in general was just so much better. I'm for capitalism locally, because when you allow like these businesses to compete in an area, that doesn't let them dominate an entire like country or like international market. It keeps the culture in an area whilst like allowing them to make money. So that way it's not like such an uneven divide. Do you see what I'm saying? Like, people are still employed and they still make like a decent amount of money, but it's not to the point where they're like rolling around in wealth and like just building disgusting, ugly advertisements everywhere. Do you know what I'm saying? Do you see what I'm saying?
I can kind of understand that when it comes to like food, the food industry, which I 100% agree with you there. And I guess like small little brick and mortar shops. But what about like this thing, right? What about the iPhone? What about Samsung? What about Sony? What about even car manufacturers? Maserati, Lamborghini, Ferrari. If you can't allow these big corporations to establish themselves as prominent brands, then there is no innovation, because then there's no competition, right? You're capping the limit of what people can do by saying, well, you can only grow to so much, because once you start extending your reach into this area, then that's a no-go, because we want local business only.
That's not necessarily true. See that? Okay. Apple started in a garage, right? They came up with that stuff without having that kind of influence in the first place. Humans are always going to be innovative. That's just how we are. We're doing it exponentially now, not because of capitalism, but because now we have the resources to do it. So, like, do so. Back in, like, say, the Roman times, Greeks, whatever, they were still incredibly innovative. Capitalism didn't exist. Corporations didn't exist. They didn't have that kind of like influence and power to like the same degree. People are always going to make things because they enjoy making things. When they're able to get that kind of reach, that's when that kind of pure innovative like love for just learning becomes a little bit corrupted, because now they have access to all this money and wealth and resources, and they're going to use it to just make money. The whole thing's a money generating process. At a certain point, the iPhone isn't gonna like get any better. I think we stopped around now, because like innovation now, it's just them releasing a new iPhone every year so they can continue to make money off of you. You know, like I think past like the iPhone, like 8, like how much has changed really?
Right. Right, but okay, so that does not mean that Apple isn't in the works of building something great, you know? I mean, yes, Apple understands, look, we release a new product every year, people are going to buy it. How is that Apple's fault? Like, if
when Apple keeps other businesses stagnant because they have like, or when corporations in general see that something innovative is made and they buy it out or they squash it out because they know that that could actually compete with their product, there's a problem, because they do that. They do that to local businesses. They do that with people who come up with incredible products. Same thing with the health industry. Like, people have come up with cures to things that have been like kept quiet and bought out because they make money off of disease.
Mm-hmm. No, that's true. But how is that the corporation's fault? Okay, so say you, right? Say you come up with the cure for cancer, and all of a sudden you have all these corporations trying to buy you out. It's as simple as you saying no. Just keep saying no, keep pushing it out, keep working for your dream, and you're going to get there. There's nothing that's going to stop you.
They stop progress. Like, there reaches a point where capitalism isn't about progress anymore, and it's about making money.
Mm-hmm.
And they're like, just because, okay, so you say no to them buying you out, well, they're gonna find other ways for like your product or idea to not go to the market, because they have that power. They can, let's say you have that cure for cancer, they could kill you if they really wanted to. Like, I hope you know that. Like, they're against labor unions and like workers unionizing for better rights and pay. Like, for example, Coca Cola, they had, what was it, a factory in some Central American country, might have been Bolivia. At that factory, they formed a labor union because like pay was so terrible, the conditions were terrible, everything about the situation was not good for the workers. But Coca Cola was making a lot of money off of them, capital. So they formed a union, and then they revolted. And you know what Coca Cola did? They sent in like a firing squad, and like they like killed them. They killed the labor, and like nothing was done about it. It didn't make it to mainstream media. You can look it up. This is true. It didn't make it to mainstream media. They kept it quiet, and they killed like, what was it, like 30 people, and they got away with it because they have that access to like I said, money, power, influence. They control the media, they control the government, they control everything. And that's the problem. They control too much.
Well, I'd have to look into that. I had never heard into that. I'd have to double check that. I just feel like there's no way to tie everything together in that sense. It would be kind of hard to like legitimately prove that Coke's CEO was the one who directly instructed them to go and do all this. But back to like the system, like individuals at the end of the day, like life as a whole is choices, right? Everything that you do is all about choices, right? I mean, there's nothing that's out of your control. There's nothing that's like if something happens to you, you can decide how to react. You can decide what your next move is going to be. And so these individuals that, sacrifice 10, 20, 30 years of their life aren't obligated to help or to instruct or to do anything to people that are choosing to let their circumstances dictate where they're at. Right?
The argument that I've made against it, they don't necessarily choose those circumstances.
They don't choose the circumstances, but they choose to stay in the circumstances. They choose not to put in the extra work, or they choose not to do the extra thing that's going to allow them to get into other places.
I have a question for you.
Mm-hmm.
Have you ever been poor?
I have, yes, very, very.
Okay. And how did you guys get out of the situation?
Well, my parents moved from Mexico to the United States. I was about 2 years old. And I mean, my parents worked like 90, 100 hours a week, both of them. Then my dad finally got a semi-steady job where he was making maybe $30,000 a year. Trying to live in America with a family of 4 on $30,000 is rough, right? And so my dad got into this really, really bad economic state where he tried to start his own business. It failed miserably, and we were struggling to make ends meet. Very, very difficult. Like poor. And that woke me up. I said, I don't want to see my parents like this ever again. I don't want to be in a position where I ever do this again. And so March of 2019, I decided that I was enough. That was it with me being broke. I wasn't going to ever allow it to be like that again. I was going to retire my dad. And I just started doing research. I mean, we have the internet. The internet is in just infinite solutions to any problem you could ever have. And so I just started doing research and I put in work. I was working 16 to 18 hours a day. Like I would literally go to sleep, wake up, work, have like 3 meals a day, but every other second I was working on my laptop. I was doing something. I was educating myself. I was researching. I was working. And I did that for 6 months nonstop until I finally had my breakthrough where I could scale my business to a next level. Now I'm at a point where I've been able to outsource most of the work and I'm almost at the point where I can retire my parents. I live a life where I don't spend every day working, but I don't feel like me myself, if I see a homeless person, I will give them money just because I can relate to them. But that does not mean that I am obligated to help that person because at the end of the day, they made decisions to get to that point. Just like I made decisions, I made life choices to get to where I'm at. Just like Bill Gates made life decisions to get to where he's at. And just like lower end people are making decisions on a consistent basis, whether consciously or subconsciously, they are still making the decisions and the actions that are keeping them in that position.
Well, 1% can't exist unless there is a 99% to uphold them. That's simply how it works. Not everyone can be rich if there are poor people.
Mm-hmm.
Poor people have to exist to uphold those corporations.
Oh, poor people will always exist. There's no doubt that poor people have to exist. Now,
it's a question of whether or not these poor people deserve healthcare, deserve food, deserve good education. Do they deserve it? And that's kind of the question here. And just because what you did was very inspiring. Working 16 to 18 hours a day is incredibly hard work.
Yeah.
And I think that you shouldn't have had to have done that. You shouldn't have been in a system that made like a teenager work that much to help his family out. Like you guys should have just had the accessibility to like resources to the point where you guys weren't struggling so much, you know?
See,
but that's the thing.
I disagree with that. I disagree with that because had I not gone through those experiences, had I not gone through all that struggle, I wouldn't be the person that I am today. You know, I would still be, because I mean, I'm not going to lie, like I used to go, do you know what raves are? Like, you know, stuff like that. I used to do that, like literally multiple times a month. I would drug myself out. I would be drinking. I would be doing all these things, right? All these things that are correlated with this bottom class of people, drugs, alcohol, and just overall poverty, right? I was choosing to make those decisions. I was deciding. At the end of the day, I was still the ones making the decisions to do drugs and to drink. And then that situation happened where I was taking life for granted. I mean, it was just too easy. I mean, I was too comfortable with my own life, you know? Even though it wasn't a good life, like I was masking all that with drugs and alcohol. And it got to the point where I saw my dad struggle. And yeah, my dad doesn't deserve the struggle that he went through because he's a fantastic man and he did everything that he could to provide for us. But at the same time, even him, like having had gone through that, his whole perspective on life, everything is starting to change. And for me, it happened like that. Like it was literally overnight. I decided no more. Enough of this bullshit. I'm gonna do something for myself. You know? And then that's where that shift happened to me. So had I not gone through that struggle, had I not gone through all those circumstances, all those things that were against me, you know, being an immigrant, like not having proper documentation to live in America, all that shit, I had to overcome that. It was things that the system, right, quote unquote, the system had against me. But at the end of the day, I would choose to look at all these things that are against me And I would say, well, fuck those things. Like, there's nothing that can stand in my way. At the end of the day, I made the conscious decision to say, fuck the things that are holding me back. What am I good at? What can I provide to this world? And I'm going to go all in on that. Now I'm at a position where I have grown so much, and I'm at a position where I can give back to people. That is a choice that I am making. I don't feel obligated to help anybody, but I can connect with these people and say, well, I mean, I don't know why you're here, but I know that I can feed you for the day, so here's $10. That does not mean that I'm going to all of a sudden, just because I can and just because it is my quote unquote obligation, doesn't mean that I'm going to see that homeless person and be like, hey dude, come live with me, or I'm going to buy you a house and here's life for you. Because at the end of the day, it's like when people say, let's give everybody $1 million, right? I am a true believer that let's take away all the money in the world and let's make everyone even at $1 million. Fast forward 2 years, I believe that the same exact people that are in power now will be in power, and the exact same people that are broke and are in those bad circumstances will be broke, everyone having had started from the same exact spot. I truly believe that.
Here's where I disagree with you. The system allows certain people to reach that point because, like I said earlier, there's socioeconomic conditions. Some people just didn't work the same amount that you did. And what you did was very inspiring. However, do you think your dad would be in a better position? Do you think he would be making like the same amount of money had you not helped out?
No, because his mindset on everything was so wrong. I mean, his mindset was like, well, I don't have my documentation. I don't have the proper papers to be here. Like, I have to hide, and I have to be scared, and I have to get these crappy jobs to make ends meet. And I showed him that it's possible, that you don't have to. Yeah, it's harder. Yeah, it's tough because, I mean, I'm not white, and I don't have all these things, and my parents weren't rich, and it's tougher, yes, but that doesn't make it impossible, right?
That mindset doesn't necessarily mean that everyone's going to have that kind of mindset. And your dad is an example of literally millions of people who weren't given the same. Because I'm sure, were you educated in America?
I was.
How was your education? How would you describe it?
Terrible. I hated every second of school. I am very anti-school.
But you're smart, clearly.
Maybe. I mean, depends on who you ask.
But to get that kind of innovation and idea, you have to have that intelligence and that kind of push and that access to resource and education in order to get to where you're going, to create that kind of business. And my mom was the same way. We were very, very poor. We lived in Tennessee. We were people wouldn't hire her because she was Hispanic.
Mm-hmm.
That's just how it was, racist, systemic racism. And we obviously have progressed a lot since then. It's been many years, and we've been able to get to a better place now. And that's not necessarily that makes me more empathetic towards people who were in our spot because we didn't get to where we are now. Because I think because the system allowed us to get here in the first place. I'm mixed. My siblings are mixed. People look at us and think we're white. I have access to a fantastic education, and it's public school. It is, but I love it. I've been able to do Diamond Challenge, entrepreneurship. I learned things on my own as well. I have a business too, and I'm able to do it because of where my parents put me.
Mm-hmm.
That's why I think that these kids should be given the opportunity to do that in the first place. But in order to do that, they have to have that baseline kind of resources.
I don't think you have to have it, because I didn't grow up with a business-oriented family. I didn't grow up with money. I didn't grow up with my dad wanting to be a millionaire or anything like that. My dad was, I wouldn't say happy with it, but he was content, working 60 hours a week and just, maybe having a vacation once a year and going out to eat maybe once a week, like that was good. That was considered good. So with I think with what you're saying is like with your surroundings, they affect your decisions, which is true. But if that were 100% true, then I would be working 60 hours a week. I would be having a regular job, and I would be okay with one vacation a week and going out to eat or one vacation a month and going out to eat once a week, because that's what my dad was okay with. But like that's not okay. Like I understand that. I see that. Like it's not hard to understand that doing drugs is bad. It's not hard to understand that being broke isn't fun. There's nothing hard about that. It's pretty freaking obvious, especially as you grow up and you see all these other people that like just aren't. Like, me being a child, I grew up thinking we were okay. Like, we never really struggled for money necessarily. I didn't get to see my dad a lot, but I thought that was normal. I thought, you're just going to work. But as I grew up, once I got into middle school and I started going to my friend's house and I saw these nice houses and I saw the quote unquote perfect families with the barbecues and the pools, I was like, whoa, like this is different. Like I don't have any of this. But it didn't like wake anything up in me. But eventually I got to the point where I was like, I'm broke. I'm a drug addict. I'm an alcoholic. Like those are not good things. I mean, mainstream media makes that very clear. For better or for worse, you shouldn't be an alcoholic. You shouldn't be a drug addict. You should be working hard, and you should be trying to make something better out of yourself. But at the end of the day, I could have made a whole different decision, and I could have stuck with the partying and the drinking and the alcohol and the drugs, but I didn't. I chose another path. I didn't know how I was going to do it, but
you had the base to do it though. Like you had the ability to like make that choice.
I had internet access. It's what I had.
Yeah. Like, and actually a lot of Americans don't.
Okay, but I mean, even homeless people have cell phones nowadays.
Sometimes. Listen, I think that your entrepreneurial spirit is fantastic. That is great, and that's what I think in the ideal world, people would have fair and equal access to education and resources. What I was talking about earlier, but in that ideal world, there would still exist people like you, where the difference between you and the average person is the mindset that you have. And yes, we would still let you guys obviously innovate, push yourself forward, create your business, whatever it is that like that excites you, motivates you, puts you ahead. But that's not to say that that kind of like entrepreneurial spirit, innovation should snowball into like straight up like dominating a market and like influencing whether or not these people's like the other 90% of people who are content with living the way that they are, influencing whether or not they should have good or bad lives and whether or not they should be slaves to your corporation. There's a big difference between the two.
See, but another thing is, I'm a true believer of this. If you don't go into entrepreneurship with the mindset that you're going to dominate, you're going to fail. Or you're going to stagnate. I mean, because like me personally, I want to be a multi-billionaire. Like there's no doubt in my mind that I'm going to be a multi-billionaire. And I tell myself and I affirm myself every single day, you have to dominate the market. You have to be this. You have to be that, because that's what it takes to be successful. Right? I mean, the upper 1% didn't become the 1% by, oh, well, I wonder what he thinks of me. Let me give him $100 just because, he's broke. Like, no, you have to have this. I mean, Kobe Bryant, right?
Thing though, that's not the idea. The idea isn't give everyone money because they deserve money because they're poor. The idea is give people equal access to like basic human needs and then allow them to go from there. Like the idea is don't let major corporations stop people from getting that equal access to that kind of education and resources, because they are. Like the idea isn't free money, because that's the whole thing behind socialism. Put resources towards like social needs and then continue to let people innovate, continue to let people push, but don't let people get to the point where they can decide whether or not someone gets elected as president, because then that's interference of democracy.
Right.
But then it's like, what would you do with $60 billion? What would you do with all that money?
I mean, me personally, I would see. I'm not disagreeing with you that it's not a good thing, because like I said, like if I see a homeless person, I'll either give them cash, or I'll go into like the nearest gas station, get like a sandwich and a drink and some chips and give it to them. But
if you had $60 you could just give $50 million to like a homeless shelter, help reduce homelessness in an area, and then still have beyond enough money to just do whatever you want.
okay, but like why should I do that? Like why like there's no part of me. Like, okay, so yes, I make
all of those people. Like that's how you made your money. You made those money because those people worked for you. Now allow those people to have basic rights.
I mean, they have basic rights. I mean, people that work for these corporations, okay, I'm not saying like in different countries, because I mean that's different. I mean, you can only influence so much in different countries. You know what I mean? Like at the end of the day, there's still corruption, there's still other things going on. But like within the US, I mean, basic human rights are given to people. Like that there's no doubt about that. Like, I mean, you can't. I
don't
can't.
think healthcare is a human right.
What?
Do you think healthcare is a human right?
I don't think healthcare is a human right. No.
Why?
Because it's at the end of the day, somebody else still has to provide a service for you, so they still are entitled to money. Now, do I think it's overpriced? Yes. That doesn't make it a human right.
So, like, just basic needs like eating and healthcare and like living somewhere are not human rights.
Well, having food is a human right, yes, and there are programs to give food, and there's different things that you can have access to.
These are like baseline things that prevent you from dying, like shelter, food, water, and healthcare. Like those are just 4 basic things that I feel like every human has a right to. And I think that's where we disagree, because the theory behind all of what I'm saying is that people have these fundamental rights, and at the end of the day, like corporations shouldn't be making that inaccessible.
Is it a human right? Yes, in theory, right? I mean, everyone, just hear me out. Everyone deserves to have food. Everyone deserves to have a home. Everyone deserves to be comfortable. Yes, 100% agree with you there. Now, what is the best way to tackle that situation? Is definitely not to give it to them for nothing. Because anything that's given isn't appreciated, right? Like, if someone were to give you $1 million, you don't value that $1 million as much as if you bled, sweat, and freaking cried over those $1 million. Does that make sense? Like, if you just hand people this stuff, if you just give it to them, then they become complacent. They're like, okay, well, I know I'm guaranteed food. I know I'm guaranteed water. I know I'm guaranteed shelter. I know I'm guaranteed healthcare. Why should I work hard to move? And this is proven. I mean, all these social welfare programs that already exist. There are people that don't need it and are abusing the crap out of it.
It's like 10% of like the people who.
But it does exist.
But that's a percentage of the population, and the idea is with education and reform, these people will have their basic needs met and strive for higher learning and innovation. And whether or not they are going to be complacent, like you said, like your own dad was fine with the way you guys were, and those people are going to continue to be fine so long as they have their basic needs met. There's a difference between because there are minimum wage workers who are doing like 70 hours a week at McDonald's and still are dying. It's just not okay.
So do something about it. If you're in a position where you're in those circumstances and you don't like it, fucking change it. Like,
everyone has the ability to do that, though.
Everyone has the ability to do it.
No, absolutely not.
Why don't you think?
Have the intellectual capability, the same access to resources, the same kind of upbringing where there's a mentality that you develop.
Intellectual ability. Like, you understand we're living in an age where had I not gone into entrepreneurship, like, I could start, because another thing that I really like is sports. I could literally start talking about sports online for 2 years, and someone is going to find me, someone with money is going to find me, they're going to offer me a sponsorship, and they're going to give me $30,000 a year just to talk about sports. Like, it's not hard. Like, it's really not as complicated as people make it seem.
Is that dumb people exist and they can't help it. That's just genetics for them. They are just legitimately stupid. Stupid people actually exist. And that doesn't mean that stupid people should die just because they're dumb. Like, because the whole thing that capitalism is based on is like, okay, you work or you die. You work or you die. And that's how it works, isn't it?
Yes.
But like, I don't think it should be, okay, now we're gonna put these laws in where if you don't work even more, you're gonna die for sure.
Okay, but like, how much of the population do you actually legitimately, not stupid because they do stupid things, like, are legitimately diagnosed stupid? Like, it's a very small percentage of the people, and we're going back to percentages, just like you said. Like, it's about percentages. Go ahead.
What'd you get on SAT?
Oh God, I don't even remember. Is SAT the ones with like the 20s or the ones with like the 1800s?
It goes up to 1600.
Okay, so that one I got like a 1450, I think.
See, you're now officially smarter than 96% of the population.
That doesn't prove intelligence.
That it proves some kind of intellectual capability.
It improves it. No,
the average score in America is like 1,000. It's like not even 1,000. It's like 950, some crazy number. Like the average person is dumb.
Do you think those numbers are skewed by people that don't take it serious? I didn't take it serious. I want to be 100% serious honest with you.
And you still got an incredibly high number. Your mind functions in a way that a lot of people's mind doesn't function, and that makes for a difference between whether or not you and that person are going to do well if you start a business or like put some kind of entrepreneurial pursuit. Like if you pursue something, like you're going to do better than that person, and that's okay. But don't let that person die because they're stupid. Like,
I can kind of see where you're going, but it doesn't mean that me, like say me as a multi-billionaire, am obligated to help that person.
You're not obligated to help that person, but I'm going to put regulations on you to where you're not infiltrating the government and telling the government, all right, pass this law. All right, allow this politician to get elected. All right, we're going to choose this person for Congress. Like, that's just not okay.
Okay. So your main solution would to take not the money away from the rich, but take the power away from the rich.
That's the idea.
Okay. So I think we're going to end it up here, and I'm just going to ask you one last question. Are billionaires evil?
On an individual basis, they're not. Everyone is a human, but billionaires do evil things. They have evil laws.
Okay. Well, thank you so much for taking time out of your day to do this. I had fun. That was pretty interesting. I like that. Yeah, so follow her on TikTok, guys. Her TikTok is Latina Mess. I'm going to put all her information in the description below. So check her out. She has some pretty cool makeup content and stuff like that. And maybe, who knows, maybe she'll start talking about this a little more in her social medias. We'll see. She seems very educated.